Hello, and welcome to Wine with Weeda, the podcast that is dedicated to engaging with health professionals and caregivers in meaningful discussions. I'm your host, Rita Shamoon, or as my clients call me, Weeda. I'm a pediatric speech pathologist, and I am so excited to have you here. Each week, we deep dive into connecting you with caregivers and healthcare professionals, sharing their insights, stories, and key takeaways to help you with your child's diagnosis and your journey. Whether you are a parent, healthcare professional, a lifetime learner, or simply a wine enthusiast, you're in the right place. So let's sit back and relax and enjoy today's episode. Welcome to Wine with Weeda. I'm your host, Rita Shamoon, or as my clients call me, Weeta. Today, I'm thrilled to be chatting with Lael Stone, an educator, author, speaker, and passionate advocate for emotional connection in families. Lael brings over 20 years of experience supporting parents and children, co-founded an co-founded an initiative. Oh my goodness, Lael, I'm a speech pathologist and I can't even
Innovative.
say
There
it.
you go.
Yeah, that's the word. Co-founded an innovative that word school focused on well-being and recently shared her insights in the documentary Scene. In this episode, we'll dive into our own stories, shape the way we parent, how connection can transform communication, and practical ways families, including those with children with additional needs, can feel truly seen, understood, and supported. So pour yourself a glass, settle in, and let's get started. Lael, I am so privileged to have you on the podcast today. Welcome to Wine with Weeda.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here, and I would love to have a glass of wine, except I don't drink. But
Oh,
I'll drink water in in honor. I
I've
mean, I
got
wish
water
I
too.
could. Oh, there you go. You're good. You're good. I love the name of your podcast. It's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I met you at the Scene documentary or the premiere in Sydney back, I
Yeah.
believe, in March or February,
Yeah. It was. I think
where
it was the beginning of. I think it was February. Yes.
February,
Yeah.
yeah, where Joe Williams, who is a
Yeah.
sweetheart, such a
Mm.
great advocate, he's been on the
Mm-hmm.
podcast,
Oh,
Maggie
beautiful.
Dent, and who was another gentleman that was there?
Nathan
Such a
Wallace.
yes,
Yeah.
him too. What an eye opener documentary. It
Yeah.
really tapped into the triggers that parents have with their children, but also how we can empower parents to create change, to break down those generational traumas, and to also help raise healthier, happier children.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was such a beautiful documentary to be a part of, and I mean, it's so incredible to see how far it's reaching, and I think the feedback that keeps coming back, particularly for couples watching it together, we're just seeing a lot
Mm.
of dads really reflecting, acknowledging maybe I need to get some support. That doesn't feel good. Like, I think storytelling in movies is such a beautiful way to help people see themselves, but also without it being too confronting. And I think that's what the documentary does so beautifully. I think people can see themselves in the parents
Mm.
and they can relate. And I think that that's what's really important, that it opens up a conversation around how we change and shift and stop that intergenerational trauma, and also really get clear on what do we want for our children, and what is being a grounded, connected parent actually look like.
Mm. And as I said off air with you, Lael, it's very different to my own parenting, but
Mm.
within myself, I can see my mum, I can see my dad.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a great way for you to recognize your own childhood traumas that you're bringing to your own parenting, but
Mm.
also a way for you to create that change so you can break that cycle as well.
Yeah. I think that for me, I think that is some of the most powerful work we can do as parents. I think we often
Mm.
prioritize schools or activities or the food we, feed our kids, and all those things are really important. But I don't know, after doing this work for a really, really long time, I come back to always that understanding our own story, healing our own wounds and triggers and traumas is one of the most powerful things we can do for our children, because otherwise we often unconsciously place them on our kids' shoulders, and our kids don't want them. Our kids are like, nah, it's not mine. And, I want to be free to be who I am. So I think having the curiosity to be aware of our patterns and stories and what we carry is, I mean, that is the first piece, knowing that, that does happen. And the second bit is really tuning into what works and what doesn't, and
Mm.
who do I want to be? Because I often talk about, our children are watching from the moment they're born. They're constantly watching us and figuring out what the world is about. And so how we turn up in the world, what we model to them creates those imprints for them. And we may say one thing but do another, but they're always watching what we're doing. And that's often what they take on board. And so I think to have the courage to lean in and be curious about what are these patterns that we might be carrying, and what do we want to heal, and what do we want it to look like for our children, it's a really powerful thing that we can do as parents.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this. How did you get into this field? You've had over 20 years experience. Let's talk about the first 5 years of your career. Where did you start, and then what led you to this amazing platform?
Yeah. Well, if we go right back, actually, my first ever company I started was actually a children's entertainment company, which is really weird. This was like when I was like 21, I started my first business. And I actually spent 7 or 8 years entertaining children, and we'd put on big shows and birthday parties. It was kind of when the Wiggles were starting, like that's how long ago it was.
Wow.
And even though it wasn't the work that I do now, it was so, nothing's wasted. I see now that
Yeah.
so much of it was about connection. It was about connection. It was about play. It was about presence. It was about attunement. I was learning all of that through entertainment, basically. So I did that for a long time. And then I actually started working in birth. So that was really where I first started working with families. So I was a childbirth
Wow.
educator and a doula for a long time. And I also worked a lot with trauma, that postnatal trauma that a lot of parents go through, when they become parents, particularly if they've had challenging birth experiences. So I spent a lot of the kind of years listening to stories, being with families in their most vulnerable moments, really looking at the impact of trauma, particularly through a birth lens. So that I kind of started there, and then that kind of moved more into working with parenting. I worked with Aware Parenting for a long time, which was really about helping children and adults process trauma, but also really prioritizing connection, using play for healing, listening to feelings, all of that kind of stuff. So I did that for a long time. I just used to run groups and work one-on-one with people. And then as my own kids kind of grew, I then ended up teaching sex education for about 5 years in secondary schools, which was a random detour, but again, also very poignant in what it taught me. Working with teenagers was amazing, particularly around these really interesting times of them figuring out who they were. So that was pretty amazing doing that kind of work. And then the opportunity to build a school came along, and that took many, many years of my life to bring that to fruition. Then from there, really, it just kind of grew more into lots of travel and speaking and writing books and working mainly just with adults. I used to, parents would often come to me and say, oh, really, my child won't listen, or my teenager's giving me grief, and can I bring my child to see you? And I only have actually worked with the adults, because I was
Yeah.
like, the child, as you would know, is always responding to their environments. And so let's look
Mhm.
at where it's sitting for you. So I would do a lot of work with the parents around tools to use with their kids, but mainly the work for me was always about, how are you turning up? What's happening for you? What happened in your childhood? How were you responded to? And so much of that then really became about my work, which is where it really sits today, which is really about helping adults understand their stories and healing it. I do a lot more work now in the corporate sector with, people, because we've all been a child,
Yeah.
looking at developing our emotional intelligence and looking at how we do turn up in the world. How do we be the best
Yeah.
version of ourselves? So it's been a beautiful organic journey. I've kind of grown as my kids have grown too. Like, my kids are all adults now, and it's been a deep privilege, really, to listen to people's stories. I think that's what, if someone was to say, what do you do? I'm like, I just listen to people's stories
Mm.
and help. Really, I think it's just given me such a beautiful insight into the human condition, who we
Yeah.
are. And really, at the end of the day, after listening to thousands of stories, we're all exactly the same. We
True.
all have the same wound of, am I enough? And Do people accept and see me as I am? And is it safe to feel? And all those kind of things. They're all the themes that turn up for most people. And I think we're
Mm,
all the adults that we are now are all doing a lot of healing work around what perhaps we didn't receive as children, and then trying to change it for our own children. And I think that's
mm,
where we have to be so compassionate and kind to ourselves, because we're doing something really big at the moment.
yeah. This is music to my ears because you've mentioned some key words here: connection, play, and parenting. And in the
Yeah.
world of speech pathology, when we're trying to create communication with children, people think I've got the tools, but it's not. It's about
Yeah.
encouraging parents to build that connection
Yeah.
through play. And if you're
Mm,
listening to the podcast, people think play is about having the teacup, building the
mm,
blocks, but that's not what I define play is. Play
yeah.
is connecting with your child in the
Yes.
moment. If you are folding washing and they want to fold with you, let
Hmm.
them. If
Yes.
they want to mix the cupcake mixture with you, or stack the dishwasher,
Mm,
let them, because
yeah.
that moment of connection creates
Mhm.
that joy,
Yeah.
fosters that beautiful relationship, and that will stay with the child more
Hmm.
than a toy. But
Yes.
what I find in
100%.
my own field here, Lael, many parents find that so hard because
Mm,
their own need wasn't met as a child. So in my field, I work 99% of the time with the parents, helping them figure themselves out so they can
yeah.
help their children learn to communicate.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying, and I absolutely relate, because most of us were not played with as children. And I think it's important to
Mm.
remember that, play is the work of children. It's not our job to spend 10 hours playing with our child every day. But it is, as you say, it is such a beautiful point of connection, play. And playfulness, I think, is something that we often forget, because we're actually really stressed, and because we
Yeah.
haven't got our own needs met, and we just got to get out of the door, and I need you to just listen, and you got to get in the car. And because I think we are in this real hustle culture, it doesn't allow us to slow down and play. And so then when we
Mm.
have, experts or people like you and me going, you need to play more, parents are like, oh God, we're not going to have time to play. Like, I mean, I remember when my kids were young and someone said that to me, and I was like, oh God, no. Like,
Yeah.
that's ridiculous. But then I began to see that the more centered I was, the more aware I was, the more attuned I was, the more playful I could be, the easier actually life was, because my
Yeah.
children, like all kids, they're just looking for those points of connection and attunement. And when
Yeah.
they feel that, then often they're more cooperative. Often they'll, open up as to what's going on. I mean, play is just such a magnificent way to kind of break down often the protection that children are carrying, but it also play
Mm.
builds safety. Not
It
only does
does.
it build safety with a person, it also helps them process whatever's going on in their world. So, I mean, the play is just so magnificent. It's about healing, it's about connection, it's about processing the world, the world and what's going on. It's just, it's like a magic tool, isn't it? And I
Yeah,
think
it
when we
is.
can see the evidence of it, and we can learn to be a bit more playful, or we even just witness our children playing and let them invite us in, they'll show us exactly what they need to do.
Yeah.
And this is what I love so much about children, is I really do believe they know what they need to do to heal. We just often get in the way, or we miss the
Mm.
cues. Whereas I think when children, they've been through something big, they'll often play it out. They'll want to play the same game over and over. They will often play games perhaps where they can be powerful. Maybe they've felt powerless. They'll bring that to you. Children often know, and it's the same with feelings and boundaries and all those kind of big things. They know, when they're needing to release it. Like, no child feels good carrying around a
Mm.
big backpack full of feelings. Like, they're often trying to alleviate that. But often we just don't necessarily see those cues or understand it as adults, because we were never taught that. And so I think,
Mm.
things like this chat, or just some of the work that's out there, is so powerful in helping adults to have these tools and skills and understanding to meet children where they're at. Because I really do believe that, our kiddos, they know what they need. We just have to often be attuned enough to get it.
Yeah. In a world currently, I see it all over social media and in mothers group, there's a lot of noise around connecting with kids. And many parents find that very overwhelming
Yeah.
because, like, as you said, the hustle culture, they just
Mm.
want to be told what to do. With your experience,
Mm,
What's one simple strategy that parents can do to initiate that beautiful connection with their children without thinking they need to get down to their level,
mm,
play with their toys,
mm.
read lots of books, especially when there are so many things on a parent's to-do list?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I absolutely love, I mean, there's many, many things, but one of the things that I love is, is known sometimes as special time or present time or connection time or whatever. And what it is it can be 10 minutes, can be 15 minutes, can be 20 minutes, can be whatever time you have, where you say to your child, let's have special time for 10 minutes. And in that 10 minutes, you set a timer, but you don't look at your phone and you don't make a cup of tea. You are just present with your child. And I think what I have found over the years is when we can set a bit of a container around it, because often when kids go, can you play with me? Like parents are like, oh, I don't want to sit on the floor and play
Mm,
Lego, right? Like I remember that. I'd be like, oh God, do we have to do this again? But when you have the container of something like just 10 minutes of play, where you actually have to turn up and be present, most adults can do that. They can not look at their phone, they can just be really locked in with their child. And that to me is one of the greatest, quickest, fastest, easiest ways to build connection is to
mm,
have, hey, we've got 15 minutes before we need to go to the dentist, or we've got 15 minutes before, we've got to start the bath. Let's have some special time. What do you want to do? And we invite the child to be the boss. We invite the child to lead where the play goes. And, as long as it feels okay for us, we do whatever the child wants to do, knowing that it may only be like 10 or 15 minutes. And in that moment, we are just following the lead of our child. And I think what that does, again, particularly if we can just be present and we're not thinking about their emails and we're not thinking about the shopping list, we're not looking at our phone, but we're just with them. To me, that's like a magic balm for children. Like they just soak it up, because actually what kids want, what they deeply want, is our presence. They want
mm,
to feel seen by us. They want the attunement. And often we don't do that because we're busy and we're doing all the things.
mm.
But 10 or 15 minutes a day, we can do. We
Yeah.
absolutely can do. So I think for me, that is one of the most important things that we can do. One of the other things that I think is really important is to actually just delight in our children. I mean, when they walk in the room, to be like, oh, I'm so happy to see you. Like just
Yeah.
to bring some delight of like, oh, I haven't seen you all day. I'm so excited to see you. And maybe you go up and you kiss all over their head and they're like, Mom, get off me. But you are
The wiping.
bringing, yeah, you're bringing that delight. I see you. I want to be with you. Like, and not that smothering kind of stuff, but just the delight of when you walk into the room, I feel so happy to see you. And I think
Mm,
even those tiny, small, simple things create a sense for children of like, I feel seen. I
yeah.
feel I feel loved. There was a something I often talk about when I do talks is one of the things I talk about is how do our children experience our love. So we often do things to show love to our children. We cook them good food and we take them to soccer practice and we do all the things. But actually, if we were to ask our children, what is it that, we do as a parents or caregivers that make you feel loved, like be really curious about what their answer is, because I have asked my children this many times over the years, what is it that Dad and I do that makes you feel loved? And their responses are amazing. And they're often things that I
Mm,
didn't even realize. They're things that I was like, oh, that's a nothing. But that is so big for them of what makes them feel loved. And that to me, I guess, is another little hack to go to your child and says, what is it that makes you feel loved? What
yeah.
is it that you love? And for them, it might be like reading books together. It might be like playing with you and my friends. It could be like ice cream. Like it could be all sorts of random things. But lean into that. And that is where that love and connection can come from, which can, again, go so, so far.
I love how you describe how simple it can be on paper, and it's honestly just asking your child to invite yourself into their world. And I
Mm,
vividly remember when my eldest was probably about 2, when I was pregnant with my third daughter, we would sit in bed together, and I would play with my belly, and my belly button was the mouth, and I would pretend it was a
mm,
character. Hello, I'm Big
mm,
Belly, and like I would just, and they would laugh so hard. And my daughter the other day said, Mum, do you remember when we would play Mr. Belly together and
mm,
I would squeeze my belly and you, I'm like,
yeah,
okay, yeah, I do. Like that was like 10 years ago. But how simple and how wonderful was that memory for her
yeah.
to recognize and to remember that's how I connected with mum.
Yeah. I think they are the things, I saw this thing on Instagram the other day because, all the good stuff comes from Instagram or TikTok. There was this little reel, but I thought it was really beautiful. And this woman was talking about, they did some research. I don't know, that maybe was a loose word, but they basically asked a whole group of kids what was their a favorite ever Christmas present. And
Mm.
actually, the kids really struggled to answer. But then they said, "What's your favorite memory with your family?" And then they just rolled off all these memories of holidays, playing together, building cubbies, like all the connection pieces. And so they
Mm.
struggled to remember the truck that they got given when they were 5.
Yeah.
Or that wasn't a favorite, but all what they did talk about were those moments. And I think, to me, I loved that, listening to that, because I thought it's so true about what we know. It is the connection, it is the moments, it is when we are together. It is those things that are so, so valuable for children. Not the
Yeah.
not the stuff, but it's about us.
Quality over quantity.
Yes,
Oh,
yeah, for
what is
sure.
that? What's that? It's not about the present, the tangible present.
Yeah,
It's about
it's the
the
presence.
presence.
Yes,
I love that
that's it.
quote. Love that quote. In your work, Lael, you speak a lot about the imprints we carry from our own childhood. How do you see parents' past experiences shaping the way they connect, communicate, and respond to their children today?
So I guess how I often talk about imprints is, we all have imprints. We've got imprints on everything because, from the
Mm.
moment we are born into this family and we're trying to make sense of the world. And so we have an imprint around trust. We watch our parents, whether they trust the world or whether they often have a narrative that says you can't trust anyone and be careful. And so all of a sudden we grow up with this story of like, okay, the world is unsafe. We can't trust people. We have imprints around food. We have imprints around intimacy. We have imprints around our body. We have imprints around exercise. We have imprints around success, around money, around everything. Because we watch in our family of origin, how the world operates. And I think as children, we think it's just our little bubble, right? But it's not, because there's many different ways to see things, and we all bring our own imprints. And our parents are often bringing their learned behavior from their family of origin, and the cycle continues. So we all have imprints, and some of them are amazing. Some imprints are really beautiful, and some actually don't serve us. And what's really interesting, I find, about this work around imprints is we often will repeat patterns and behave in certain ways that we don't actually like, and we find very hard to shift and move because the origins sit in the family that we grew up in. And what's
Mm.
interesting is our fundamental need as humans is to belong. Belonging is our big thing. Do I belong? Now, we
Mm.
belong in a family purely because we've been born into a family, right? You belong because you have a place there. But we often have these unwritten stories around belonging. So the imprints tie into that. If one imprint in your family is, you know, um, we are only, you're only worthy if you work really hard, right? That
Yes.
could
You
be
said
that
that in
could
your book, by the way. You
yeah,
spoke about
yeah.
that. Yeah.
You're only worthy if you work really, really hard. So that becomes like an unconscious imprint to belonging. So
Mm.
then, we might grow up and go, I don't really want to work that hard, or it feels really big. But often we will default to doing it because our deep need is to belong. So if our family's
Mm.
like, why don't you work hard? Well, you're not one of us. We're going to go, yeah, I need to belong to you. So that's what I'll do. And we do that with a lot of things often, and they're often unconscious.
Mm.
It's like, again, too, if we grow up in a family where no one ever deals with anything, no one ever speaks about it, we just turn the other way, we push it under the rug, we don't mention it. And then you kind of sit there and go, actually, this doesn't feel good. I want to talk about stuff. Then the family kind of shuns you a bit, or they turn away because that's not what we do. And often the pull is between, well, I want to belong, and be part of my family, but also this doesn't feel good for my spirit and who I am. And so that is often where we see the rub happens. And often
Mm.
the challenge or the journey is to understand that we can change these patterns and insights and these cycles that have carried on through our family, and we still do belong. And we often, I think, as you mentioned to me earlier, we often change a lot of these patterns for our
Yeah.
children. We
Yep.
often go, I actually don't want my kids to carry that same thing forward. I don't want my kids to bury everything under the rug. I don't want them to
Mm.
not be able to deal with stuff. So I'm going to be the brave one to say, actually, I'm going to lean into this stuff that's really tricky here. And what comes with that often is sometimes distress, because we're like, my parents, my family's going to disown me. I'm doing it
Mm,
differently. Yet what I find is that once we are able to do that work, we know that, we still belong to that family, even if we do it differently. And often we are the courageous ones to change these patterns
yes.
for the future and for our children and our future children, grandchildren and all that kind of stuff. So it's tricky work. We talk about doing the work, and doing the work takes a lot of courage to lean into the stories that don't serve us and what we want to change. So I think, for me, especially when I wrote that book, and the work that I've done for a long time, one of the things I see a lot of is parents coming to this work and wanting to change it for their children, because they're
Mm,
like, I don't want my kids to carry the same pattern. And they do that work and they shift it and they change the story, and then we can see that their kids have a different story and imprint carrying forward, and that's a
yeah.
beautiful thing. And there's no perfect in this. Like, you can't get it all 100% right, so your kids will never have stuff. Your kids are going to have stuff just because they're human, right?
Yeah.
They're going to have to navigate life with its ups and downs. But ideally, what we do is we give them the skills and the tools to know how to navigate it.
With my own caseload and clients, and even with relationships, it took me a long time to redefine the definition of normal. And with working with families, I had to start to realize just because their family dynamic or their relationships didn't reflect my own relationships and my own family upbringing doesn't mean they're not normal.
Hmm.
That's their normal.
Yep.
Yeah. Very different to my normal. And it took me quite a while to, even when I was in past relationships, why does he treat me that way? Or why does he
Yeah.
not communicate? Whereas my family, we talk about everything. But it took a long time
Yeah.
for me to appreciate that's his normal or that's their normal.
Yeah.
And I have to navigate it
Yeah.
myself to then support them too on the journey.
Yeah. Oh, you bring up a really great point there. Yeah, I don't think there is normal. I mean, everybody's unique, and every family is this kind of unique combination. And I think the piece that I find often interesting in those conversations is that we often will judge and make people wrong because they do it differently. And I think part of the learning is often knowing that it's just different. And and then the trick is, how do we
Mm,
work together with this? How do we navigate it? How do we find a way to get our needs met? How do we communicate in ways that, there's, and that's one of the trickiest parts of partnership, really, especially when we have children. We come together to have children, and we come with our own imprints and stories. And, there's a lot that goes with that. And so then we come together and we have children. And that's often where tension
mm,
happens, because we're bringing your story, someone else's story to the mix. And that's often where we have these different values, or we have different ways of dealing with things. And so much of the work, I think, in early parenting is working through a lot of that stuff, is seeing our own patterns and imprints perhaps that don't serve us, is having those really adult, mature conversations of what it feels like for you, what's being activated, all those kind of things. They're really, it's big work. It's big work, raising kids and unpacking
it's
our own
scary
stuff.
work. Let me tell you. I've been doing the work myself. Yeah.
Yeah, it's big, I think, but I don't know, I've never met anyone that doesn't say it's not worth it, because it is.
Mm,
Because we're meant to evolve and grow. We're meant to, ideally, we're meant to be in functional relationships, not dysfunctional relationships.
mm,
And yet, I think when we look at evolution over time, and I think this is a really important thing to understand, our great grandparents were learning just to navigate the war, right? And it was about
mm,
survival. And our grandparents were then again on the aftermath of that, going through the depression, or how do we just keep a roof over our head and money? So there was no space for feelings. There was no space to deal with stuff. You just kind of got on with it.
yeah.
And then our parents came along, and it became more about, okay, there's a possibility for a future here, and you can kind of do it all. And so then they were working through jobs and building houses and all that kind of stuff. And then we came along, and it was all about education, like get a good education. And now we're having kids, right? And we have access to information in a way that our parents, grandparents, and great grandparents never had. I mean,
Yeah.
thanks mainly to the internet, but we have access to information and research and science and understanding in a way that our grandparents never ever would have touched. And so here we are at this point in time, with an invitation to do this deeper healing work for the next generations to come. And it's pretty extraordinary, and it's tricky. And that's why I often say we have to be so kind and compassionate. But I also think it's important that we don't look at our parents or our grandparents or great-grandparents and have judgment, because perhaps if we were
Mm,
standing in their shoes, we would have done the same thing. We would
yeah.
have been surviving in those spaces and places. And so I think that that's an important piece that comes with this work as well.
It's also very empowering, I feel like we are creating change, but also appreciating where we came from
Mm.
and taking our own ancestors and parents' challenges that have shaped us to who we're becoming and
Mm.
helping the future generation too.
Yeah. Yep.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
It's big. It's
It's
amazing.
huge.
It's huge.
It's huge.
But I often say this, that my kids are 25, 22, and almost 18, and I see the emotional awareness that they have, which was so different to what I had at 25 and
Mm,
22. And I see the integration of their own self, their ability to have empathy, compassion, understand, unpack stuff when it feels hard, like in a way that took, I wasn't in my 40s till I started to get all that stuff. So I absolutely see the evidence of how powerful it is to look at our own stuff, to lean into the hard work, because we then imprint that on our kids, and then our kids are,
mm,
amazing. Like, and the world needs that. They need these aware,
mm.
awake, conscious children coming through, so that we don't mess up this planet even more. Really, I think that's the key.
That's the key. That's the key. Now, many children with additional needs, whether it's developmental, communication based, or emotional, can find connection really challenging.
Yeah,
What guidance would you offer parents who want to connect more deeply with their child, but they're not sure where to begin with
yeah.
the
Well,
additional needs? Yeah.
yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is come back to this, is to the parents to go, you know your child better than anyone.
Hmm.
I probably don't have an answer for this because I don't know your child, but you are actually the expert on your child. And what I would say to parents is trust yourself. Trust your gut. What lights your child up? Where do you see them engaged? Where are those places where you feel those elements of connection? And can we soften into those spaces more? I think at the end of the day, no matter who a child is, they all benefit from that deep, unconditional, non-judgmental presence of an adult,
Mm.
where we look at the child and we have an essence that says, "I accept you just the way you are." And that can be very tricky when there's a lot of challenges. I know that, working with families as well, particularly with some beautiful kiddos that have got some big stories going on. And it can feel really challenging when there's grief for parents wishing it looked a different way, where it sometimes creates a lot of stress in the house. I know it is not easy at all. And I don't think there's a quick one answer for it, but I would keep coming back to parents to saying, what do you see? What do you know about your beautiful little human? And and sometimes I guess the only thing I do say to parents is, if you were to close your eyes and just imagine you were in your child's body for a minute, like really just imagine you're in their body, you're feeling them, you've got a sense of them. What is it that you think they need from you? And that's a beautiful exercise to do, because when we can put ourselves in the shoes of our children, we often get a sense of, they just need me to laugh with them more, or they just need me to not control, or they just need me to give them a little bit of space, but that deep love, or they just need my presence, or they just need me to give them more choice and autonomy. Like, I think when we can put ourselves in our children's shoes, we get a sense of what it is that they might need, to move forward. And I think that's a beautiful thing to think about, whether it is children with, additional needs or not. Any parent, I think we reach points sometimes in our parenting where we're like, I don't know what to do here. Like, what do I do? And I often say to parents, well, if you were 4 or you were 10 or you were 15 and this was
Mm.
going on, what would you deeply want from your parent in that moment? Would
Yeah.
you want them to yell at you? Would you want them to shame you? Would you want them to just ignore you and turn away? Would you want them to take your iPhone off you? Would you want them to judge you? Like, no, nobody would want that. What we would
Mm-mm.
want is a parent who could take a deep breath, get down on our level and go, okay, let's work through this, or I see you and I'm here with you and I can sit in the fire with you, or I can meet you in these big feelings, or I want to understand why you did what you did. Or, I think we all, what we deeply want is someone, an adult who is anchored enough to sit in the uncomfortable with us. And
Yeah.
it's hard. And again, why it's so hard is because most of us have never experienced that ourselves. That's
Mm.
why we have to give ourselves the biggest break. It's why we have to be kind. It's why we have to be compassionate, because we're asking adults to do something that hasn't often been done to them. And that's why it's clunky and it feels hard. But every time you do it, there's more evidence and you get better at it and better at it. And then you learn how to do it and be it. So I come back to that, trusting yourself, putting yourself in your child's shoes, really leaning into, if I was them, what would I need?
Yeah.
And then do that.
It's like, as you're supporting your child, it's like you're also indirectly healing yourself too, figuring out
Mhm.
what the little child in you needed and you
Mhm.
offering that. And I feel
Yeah.
I've been on that journey and myself, I just wanted someone to listen. And I actually mentioned this to my friend the other day. When I was going through a really hard time as a 16-year-old, I just technically needed a wine with weeder. I needed
Yeah.
someone to, even though I shouldn't be drinking at 16, but it's the concept of that wine with weeder gives that space for someone to listen to their story. Because when I went through a hard time, no one listened to my story because I wasn't physically harmed.
Yes.
I was emotionally harmed, spiritually harmed, but because I wasn't depicting that first, so for them to recognize that, they saw me as okay. But as time went on, and I started to recognize my triggers, I just needed someone to listen. So when I
Yeah,
look at my own children, they need a wine with mummy, like
they do.
whining, like have a whinge, have a wine to me,
Yes.
because
Yes.
I needed that when I was
Mhm.
12 years old, and so
Yeah.
forth.
I think you're right on the money. I think that's actually what we all need. We just want to be heard. I
Mm,
think whether we're 3, and it's not fair because there's a new baby in the family, or we're 6 and we're struggling with school, or we're 13 and we're going through puberty, I think what we need is a safe place to land where someone doesn't judge
mm,
us and they don't fix us, and they just sit there and listen and say, hey, you can bring it to me and you can
mm,
lay it in my lap and I'm going to hold it tenderly and I'm going to love you no matter what you bring. I think that's what we all deeply wanted and needed, because that's what makes us feel seen, and also lets us know, it sends that message and that imprint that all of you is lovable. Not just the
yeah,
good bits, but all of you, the parts that are messy, the parts that are confused, the parts that are angry, all of you is lovable.
yeah. 100%. I love that. I love that. For any parent feeling overwhelmed or stretched thin and they're unsure that they're doing it right, as we always want to, what's one gentle, accessible practice that they could try this week with their parents, particularly during the busy festive periods?
Yeah, it's really, really tricky. I think I'm a big fan of looking for evidence, because there's
Mm.
times where we're like, this feels really hard, but, and am I messing it up? And then your child will just run up to you and give you a kiss on the nose, and you're like, oh, okay. Or at night when you say go to bed and then they just want to sit there and talk to you, you're like, even though you're like, oh God, no, I have to go and do the washing or all the things, there's a bid for connection there from you. I think, sometimes, especially around raising teenagers, there were times my son was a bit of a daredevil. Like if there was something to try or jump off or do, he was going to do it, right? And so I was like, is he going to be okay in the world? And I remember just thinking, all right, I just need to look for evidence that he's good, that he's okay. And, he'd come home from school one day and he came home and he's like, I was late from school because there was this man at the train station and he didn't know how to get one of the train tickets. And so I took him down and helped him get it. But then he didn't have the right money. So then I gave him some money to do it. And, he was like 75 or something. And then, and I felt that I didn't want him to have to do it on his own. So I stayed with him and I missed 2 trains to help him. And he's telling me this story and I'm like, oh my God, like you're going to be fine. Like I was just kind of like, I had to see the evidence of, that he's got that beautiful heart, or he could see, because I think we sometimes get worried that we're messing it up or that they're not going to be okay. So I'm like, look for those little moments of evidence, where you see the connection, or maybe you see your kids playing nicely together or not. Sometimes that's not that frequent. But I think it's in those softer moments of connection, or of those little things where we go, it's okay.
Yeah.
We're okay. I mean, I think that that's a beautiful question. Like, what can we do when we're feeling like it's really tricky? I think the invitation is always, we need to pause a bit and take a breath. And even amongst the busyness of the school concerts and the end of year stuff and all the things, like, how do we make it a little bit easier where we just take 20 minutes to just pause, where we just, I don't know, we got a takeaway instead of cooking, and we just play, or we have a little dance party, or we do something that just allows a little bit of connection amongst the chaos. Or sometimes it's about saying, no, we
No
can't go to
boundary.
that gathering. We can't do that, because actually what we need is to stay in our pajamas till like 12 o'clock and just hang out. I think sometimes we get so caught up in the shoulds. And I think it's really important that we actually go, what's important here? What's important here is connection. And usually in the family, there's at least one child who is often the barometer of where it's too much, because
Yeah.
they often can't cope. It's too much. They can't go to 3 functions. They can't do all those things. And for me, that was my beautiful middle child. She was just a super highly sensitive, gorgeous human, and she couldn't run at the pace that I would run at. And so when she started to lose it a bit, I'd be like, yeah, we need to pull back a bit, because it was
Yeah.
too much. She was the beautiful barometer of what was enough. So
Mm.
I think when we come back to what can we do, I'm like, look for the evidence, slow it down just a little bit, come back to those beautiful moments and bits of connection. That is often what can help us keep our feet on the ground as we
Mm.
navigate this big time.
Yeah. 100%. Love it. As I said, it's music to my ears because it's the same way to help a child communicate. It's
Yeah.
without sounding disrespectful to the profession, but it comes back down to just connecting,
Yes.
really keeping it simple.
Yeah.
As hard as it is, it's actually the most simple thing you can do for your child and for yourself too. For yourself.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And I mean, it is simple, but we actually often have to learn how to do it. Like,
Mhm.
I think we have to undo a whole lot of stuff to then be able to learn how to do it, to be present. So yeah, but once you get it and you feel it, it can be amazing and
Yeah.
life changing, can it?
Yeah.
Mm.
It's even when it comes to relationship, like friendship dynamics, and for myself, just reflecting on my own dynamics, it's about being vulnerable and creating that
Mm.
space of connection where you're being yourself. Because I
Mhm.
always say, when you're yourself, it's like an indirect permission for the other person.
Yes.
Hey,
Yeah.
I've put down my guard. I give you permission to be yourself too, because we're creating
Mm.
this safe space, because our whole lives we've had a mask on
Yeah.
because of our conditions that we've been taught on how we should be. But when you
Mhm.
find people that you're aligned to, and you just take down that mask,
Yeah.
it's that beautiful connection that you create,
Yeah.
which actually creates such a beautiful long-term relationship.
It does, doesn't it? I think, I often think about, we've all learnt or been trained on some level to be really
Mm.
defensive and to be really
Mhm.
judgmental, right? We know I didn't do wrong. I'm not going to own my behavior. We blame everybody else. Like, that's the world that we
Mm.
live in. It's what we've been raised in, where this culture of kind of being the victim on some level and making everybody else wrong. And I think what goes with that is that it's hard for us to then be real and be vulnerable, because is it safe enough, right? Makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense why we're guarded. And I always come back to just, I just wish with every person that we met, that we could see behind their story. Like, if we could
Mhm.
see what has happened to them on their journey, we got this little snapshot of them, we would have nothing but compassion for every human, because we would see the protection they've needed to put up. We'd see the trauma that they've been through. We'd see how hard they are working just to be in the world. We wouldn't be judgmental. We'd just be like,
Mm.
oh, I get it. And we would have more
Come
compassion.
get a hug.
Yes, totally. Yet I think we're living in this world where we're really polarized and we like to make people wrong. And, I think for me, one of my big messages is that compassion for everybody and their story. And it doesn't mean we
Mm.
just allow bad behavior and, we don't have boundaries. Like those things are really important. But I think coming back to understanding that we're all humans doing the best that we can,
Yeah.
and when we can come from that place, I think it allows us to soften and to connect with our hearts, which we know it's the gold, right?
Oh, it's so true. It's so true. As I said earlier, I loved Own Your Story. It really tapped into understanding my own childhood triggers and how I can create better relationships with my partner and children. But Liao, you have a stellar list of books that you have written too. How can
Mm.
people access them so they can read into it too?
Thank you. You can find my books on my website. So Own
Hmm.
Your Story is still in bookstores all over Australia, and you can get it online. It's also on Audible, so you can listen to me tell you the stories in the books. And then my other book is called Raising Resilient and Compassionate Children, and that you can find on Amazon. So
Fantastic.
yeah.
I saw something on your Instagram the other day, some workshops for parents too and relationships. What's that about?
Yes. Yeah, I had a webinar that I ran a few weeks ago, which was with a colleague of mine, Mark G, who's a dad's father's counselor. He's amazing. And we just had a webinar on really how do we get on the same page as partners
Mm,
and parents, and just went through all lots of stuff around behavior and connection and then relationships and repairing and triggers and all that stuff. And so we had a live webinar, but that will also be available on my website, I think, in about
fantastic.
a few days. So whenever this comes out. So yeah, I've got lots of different webinars and stuff on my website if people want it, and parenting courses and all the things. There's lots of stuff there.
It's like the goodie bag of emotional intelligence and how we can change our
Mm,
lives. I will
mm.
put all this detail on the show notes and on the Instagram links too. Liel, it has been amazing. I can talk to you for hours. I would love to talk to you about attachment styles, avoidance behaviors, and just go on and on and on. But that's
We'll have to
another
do a part two.
episode. Part
Yeah.
two, part two.
Yeah.
I ask all my guests, Liel, if you were to be a better version of yourself tomorrow, what word will you apply to yourself today?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, the first thing I want to say is like, I feel like I'm a great version of myself now. I've just turned 50 this year, and I feel like
Happy
I am
birthday.
like I am like living me now, but within that, what would I say? Even a better version of myself. Um, I actually would use the word dedication, not discipline, because I don't love that word discipline. As soon as someone says discipline, I go, ugh, I'm not doing that. I would use the word dedication, and what I would mean by that is being even more dedicated to living my best life.
Yeah.
And, the things that I know serve me, like meditating and being in nature and stillness, I would be even more dedicated to them. I think
Yeah.
that's probably what I would say. That's a good question. No one's ever asked me that question before. That's a good one. Yeah.
You're welcome. I love
Mm.
that because that whole idea of discipline, you think, oh, hard work, hustle, stick to that
Yeah.
exercise regime. You're so disciplined. Discipline creates the leaders of the future. But you've
Yeah.
added a beautiful twist to it,
Mm.
dedication. I'm
Yes.
dedicated to be a better speech pathologist. I'm dedicated to being a better
Yes.
parent. And by doing
Mm.
that, I need to do X, Y, Z
Yeah.
more. And that
Yeah.
is a nice way to not say discipline because of that negative tone, but more positively
Yeah.
dedication. What a great word. No one's ever said that before.
Oh, I love that. Well, I think it's funny because discipline for me, as soon as someone tells me I have to be disciplined on what to do, I just automatically do the opposite. Like I'm just like,
I think of
don't
boot
tell me what
camp
to
when I hear
do.
the word
Like,
discipline.
yeah,
I
I
think of
just doesn't work.
burpees and all.
Yeah, it doesn't work with me. I've never stuck to anything, but I think dedication is it just feels softer, and it feels that there's more reverence there. And it feels like it's not a I have to, but it's like I choose to. And I think that
Yes.
that's what feels really good around it. So,
Yes.
yeah.
I love it. Thank you, Leah, for coming on Wine with Weeda today. It has been a gem. And myself as a parent, I have learnt so much about you, especially the idea of connection and just what was that phrase you said earlier? Let's create that special moment before we go to the dentist or we go to
Yeah.
school,
Yeah.
or even finding the evidence. I think that's a big one. I love that
Mm.
one. Find the
Mhm.
evidence that something is going right for your child rather
Yes.
than the narrative that we tell ourselves, right? Yeah,
And
loved
I
it.
think
Loved it.
that is a tricky one, isn't it? Because we often default to the negative because we're pretty comfortable
Mm,
sitting in that place. But I think the more we can, look at what is working and we look at the evidence there, it keeps us more open to more connection, but it also, keeps us open to the possibilities of those shifts and changes that we want to see. So, yeah, it's
yeah.
good.
Thank you everyone for listening to this episode of Wine with Weta. Another one will be brought to your ears really soon. Take care, everyone. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Wine with Weta. I hope you found some new inspiration, learnt something new, or gained a fresh perspective. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd be so grateful if you please leave a 5-star review, as it really helps the show get in the ears of new listeners, plus it takes 5 seconds. If you're keen for more strategies and insights, then head over to Instagram and follow RS Speech Pathology.